They got instructions on everything. It's easy to be an American, you know, on my return envelopes. They got a little box in the upper right-hand corner. You guys have seen a box about the size of a stamp. But they don't let it go there. Inside the little box the size of a stamp, they write, put stamp here.
Hey there, this is Dave from At The Wheels, and thanks for checking out the channel. So the weather hasn't been cooperating that great of late, and, it's not officially car season yet, so we're going to do a little bit of a different video today. We're going to do my top 10 favorite cars of all time, along with my top 10 favorite rock and roll albums. So thanks for checking it out. We're going to start right now. And yes, as a little aside, I know I use kind of an odd radio kind of voice that's a little bit cheesy when I do some of the beginning intros of these videos. I'm not really sure why I do it. I did have a very, very big fascination with Guy Smiley back in the day from when I think that was like Sesame Street. He was kind of one of those guys. So that's probably where it came from. Or it's because I ate paint chips as a child. But whatever it is, it's kind of fun, right? This machine here is not on my top 10 cars of all time, but let me tell you, I do love it. What a lawnmower this thing is, huh? Good morning and hello. Welcome to At The Wheels, my top 10 list of my favorite cars or cars that I desire and my top 10 rock and roll albums. We are going to jump right into this list in order not to make this video too long. Nobody wants to listen to me speak longer than they have to. So my number one car, and this is not really in any particular order, but this one just happens to coincide with the number one choice that I would have, and that is the Porsche 918 Spyder. Can't even mention that car without getting the chills, man. Whew, yeah, it's incredible, let's be honest. It is a hybrid system with about 600 horsepower in the gasoline-powered engine and about 300 with the two electric motors. It is insanely fast. It sounds amazing. And what's interesting about the 918 is that a lot of people in some of the early reviews, they liked it, but they weren't, I don't know, they were just kind of weird about it. They weren't blown away. So it was great to see a recent video from, I think it was the Throttle House guys, and they just recently reviewed it again, and they were just like raving, like superlatives were just flying out of their mouth about what an incredible car this is. And I agree, it's in my number one spot, there's no question. So the funny thing is, when I moved into this house 5 years ago, we were having a little dinner party here, and my neighbor I got to be friendly with, a guy named George, good guy. I had said, listen, he said, what can I bring? I said, I'll tell you what you can bring. You can bring me a 918 Spyder. And guess what? He did. Of course, it was, this big. So I was a little disappointed, and George and I haven't been friends since. But so anyways, I do have a 918 Spyder, just not one that I can actually fit in at this point and drive. So that is my number one choice. What do you think number two is? Well, you guessed it. It's another Porsche. So yeah, I would say that, and again, this might still even follow a little bit of an order here, the 992 Porsche GT3. I've told the story before about how I was at a Cars and Coffee. There was an older gentleman that came in. He had a shark blue 992 GT3. Everything on his body was blue, matching the car. That's how I kind of got my orange thing, because I got the orange car. But anyways, I did have a chance, not his car, but I did have a chance to drive the 992 GT3 briefly when I took an insane drive down to a dealership and just had to do it. And it is one of the most infectious sounding vehicles you will ever be in your entire life without being too overwhelming. The handling, I didn't get the chance to really ring out much, but I'm sure it's what everybody says it is. And the funny thing about these 911s, you always hear, well, they look the same for 1,000 years and they're not really that sexy compared to other cars. Absolute BS. Every single Cars and Coffee that I go to, when there's a GT3 there, it doesn't matter what the generation is, there's always a crowd. There's always people excited about it. They want to talk about it. They want to look at it. Amazing car, and the 992 Evolution is just, top of the list. And the fun thing about me mentioning the 992 GT3 is one of my favorite all-time cars, I can now finally announce I've just got one. Yeah, baby! Oh, shit. So how about number three? Well, number three is, one more time, baby, Porsche. Yeah. So that would be another 992, except this one is going to be the Turbo S. And when I was looking for a car before I got my GTS, I was hopeful that, no way I could swing a 992, but I was hopeful to maybe pick up an older Turbo S, and I almost did. It was a 2014. It was reasonably priced. It was black, had the yellow brakes. Almost did it. The power on those cars is insane. I mean, infectious. It's the generation I was looking at, I think was around 550, 560, something like that. But the current Turbo S is about 650. We all have seen all the videos. They just stomp on everything, including some of the electric cars. But all-wheel drive, just aesthetically, they're just gorgeous. But I don't know. I've always wanted a Turbo S, but I think I'm leaning towards the GT3 thing at this point. Who knows? When I get to that level, we'll see what I end up with. Anyways, let's move on to number 4. So number 4 is a car that, amazingly, is somebody I know actually has this car, and they only made like 1,000 of these, and that would be the BMW M5 CS. Whew, man, is that car impressive. So this gentleman, Chris, that I know, really good guy, awesome guy, he has one, and when he first got it, I don't think since, he's put hardly any miles on it. I think he's sort of like owning it as a collector vehicle. But he acknowledges, as anybody would, that it is an unreal car. It has won multiple awards, Car of the Year. It's bested some of the best cars in the world in certain tests. It looks great. There's a limited number of color schemes that came in. So yeah, if I could get myself a BMW CS, M5 CS, I would do that immediately. So Chris, I'd like you to give it to me. Thank you. All right, so let's go on to number 5. And number 5 is a car that I've actually owned 2 of. I have 2 different versions of this car. So I had a 2002 BMW M3, the E46 generation. That was a black on black car. Loved it. Manual transmission. When I owned an E46 that was my first foray into BMW, and it was great. I loved it. I mean, it was definitely quick. I know the American version was underpowered and all that, but I loved it. And so when I got into the E46, I had heard a lot of people say early on, oh, it's fatter and his steering's not as good, it's numb, blah, blah, blah. Nah, bzzz, absolute crap. That car handled so brilliantly. I loved the steering feel. The transmission was immaculate. It was plenty powerful enough. So what I ended up doing is I ended up buying another one. I bought a 2004, which was carbon black metallic on cinnamon, one of the sexiest color combinations to this day. I wish I could have that car back. I've actually kept my eyes open to see if there's any around that are reasonable, and there's not a lot because of the collector value, but E46 BMW M3, no question, one of the greatest cars ever. Even though I've already owned it, I would like to own it again. So let's go on to number 6. All right, so number 6 is definitely a dream car, man. Big dollars, and cost of ownership, that whole thing. But that would be the Ferrari 812 Superfast. So I saw a review of Joey Tribbiani there, Matt LeBlanc, driving the Superfast on, I think it was Top Gear he was hooked up with. And it was one of the most just enthusiastic, kind of, I almost want to use the word adorable, reviews that I've ever seen. He was just so enamored with this car. He was like a little child driving that thing because it's insanely fast. It sounds incredible. It looks amazing. About 6-7 months ago, when somebody showed up, New Country BMW had a big event, Cars and Coffee thing, and somebody showed up in one of these things. And what a crowd around this car, man. Just incredible. Yeah, Ferrari Superfast, man. That would be, if I could have one Ferrari, and honestly, I think I would choose that. I mean, maybe not over an F50 or Enzo, just because of the collector value, but that would be my pick. Yeah, Ferrari Superfast. So let's go on to number 7. All right, so number 7 is a car that I lusted after and still do to this day back when I was in high school.
Oh, sexy.
And, 1987 was a great year. It's one of my favorite years. I met a lot of kids my own age. I was having fun, going to parties. It was a good time. So that year also saw the year that the Buick Regal Grand National became a big hit. And there was one version of that car, the GNX, that I was completely obsessed with, as were many people. They made, I think, 547. The power was on that car, I think, rated at about 276 and close to 350 torque, but everybody said it was underrated. It was a co-venture with, I can never remember if it's Cosworth or McLaren or whoever it was, but whatever. It was a limited edition. They made 547. And here's the crazy thing. In Manchester, Connecticut, I used to drive down there all the time to go to an awesome place called Record Breaker to buy my albums because I was a metalhead freak. And there was one sitting in the showroom floor. An actual GNX, not a Grand National, a GNX. And I found out many years later that that car sat there for a while. I believe they didn't sell it. They had to actually trade it to a different dealership or something. That's what I heard. Can you imagine having that car now? So yeah, the Buick Regal GNX, incredible car. I still love the looks of it today. I think it's aged well. It's amazing. It always draws a crowd at any Cars and Coffee. So that's on my list. So number 8 is going to be one of those early, almost like the Countach, one of those poster on the wall cars. And I was extremely obsessed with the Lotus Esprit, the V8. That car, the twin turbo V8, incredibly just, I don't know, I thought it was like the coolest looking exotic car. It was so low to the ground. I've seen a couple in person over the years. 350 horsepower, 290 torque, somewhere in that thing. Still by today's standards, a very quick car. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful car. Very quick, and I know that market continues to be strong. So let's go to number 9, and number 9 is going to be from my birth year era. That would be probably a 69 Pontiac Firebird. Now, I know they've had a lot of engine choices, and I believe the top end, I made some notes. I think it was around 345 and maybe 400 torque. But, whatever the top engine was, I'm not a classic car guy, so I don't know all the details, but I just love the look. I actually would say I probably would choose a Firebird over a GTO. As I said, I think aesthetically they're more attractive, and it's just always been something I've been enamored with. So yeah, Pontiac Firebird from that late 60s generation would be on my list for sure as a classic car. And then finally, number 10, that is going to be the Aston Martin DBS Volante Superleggera. And I had to reference the list again here for a second because it's such a mouthful to say. But that car, the Aston Martins are just incredible. They're beautiful, beautiful cars. That DBS Volante, that cabriolet, I mean, come on, that car is gorgeous. What is it, a V12, 715 horsepower, just absolutely insane. So that would round out my list for number 10. And these are all great cars. Please leave your comments. Let me know what you think. And now on to something else. All right, so starting the list of the top 10 rock and roll albums, for me at least, is unquestionably, this is another example of this number 1 that I'm going to mention, is my number 1 of all time. Unquestionably. It's always been my Desert Island Disc. It would be Animals by Pink Floyd. I don't know, I've listened, I am a music junkie. I mean, beyond what the average person would be. I've listened to and enjoy all kinds of varieties of music and genres, all that. Nothing has beat Animals for me ever at this point. It is an album that came out in the 70s, late 70s, and it was 70s, 77. But Animals to me is the icon. It is the gold standard. Dogs alone is worth its own little shrine, put way up here and untouchable. But I mean, Sheep, the album is absolutely immaculate. Whether it's the lyrical themes, just the music, the orchestration, the arrangement, Animals is number 1. Probably will always be. I can't imagine it ever, being toppled. So, yep, that's my number 1. All right, so number 2 is following the line kind of what my favorite all-time bands are, because my favorite all-time band is Pink Floyd, and that was number 1. With Animals, number 2 is Iron Maiden's Peace of Mind. Wow, what an album. And interesting story about Iron Maiden. So back in the 80s, when I was really getting into hard rock and early metal, my buddy Rob Mercier, kid looked just like Jimi Hendrix. Swear, he was just incredible. He looked like he could be his kid. Great kid, and he was really into Iron Maiden, and I was really into Judas Priest. And obviously, very similar English bands, whatever. So one day I gave him Screaming for Vengeance, and he gave me The Number of the Beast. And yeah, I kind of never looked back. Still loved Judas Priest, of course, but Iron Maiden kind of took over their spot for sure, and I became completely obsessed with that band. But it wasn't until Peace of Mind came out. I don't know what it was about that album. Well, I sort of know. It was Where Eagles Dare and Flight of Icarus and Die With Your Boots On. Just an absolutely incredible metal album. Incredible. Dickinson's vocals. Steve Harris to this day is one of my favorite. This is the guy here, Jaco Pastorius, my favorite bass player of all time. One of the greatest, if not the greatest ever, electric bass player. But Steve Harris is an incredible bass player, and he writes pretty much most of all the music and the songs and the arrangements and lyrics. And so yeah, Iron Maiden Peace of Mind is number 2, unquestionably. So number 3, actually my first concert ever in 1983 was on this tour. And that would be the amazing trio from Canada, Rush, and their brilliant album Signals. And Signals, I remember seeing the video for Subdivisions, and like many, many kids, was just like, hey man, that's me. I'm kind of a dork a little bit. So loved the themes, loved the tune, loved the synths interwoven with the song. Just iconic. That beginning to Subdivisions is incredible. So yeah, that Signals album to this day, that just resonated with me because I just listened to it so much, especially because it was my first concert seeing Rush in '83 in Hartford, Connecticut. Great band, Neil Peart, rest in peace. That whole thing just crushed me as it did a lot of people. But great album, great band. Number 4 is actually the first compact disc I ever owned. Yeah, the album came out in '86, May of '86, and Peter Gabriel's So. I mean, In Your Eyes, Mercy Street, Red Rain, that alone makes the album, complete, just absolute icon. But he's long been my favorite solo artist. He's a brilliant musician. I don't use the word genius often, but he's absolutely a genius. Really looking forward to seeing him this coming September in Boston. He puts on one of the best live shows. He's a great guy. And the So album should be on most people who are into a variety of music. It should certainly be in their top 20, I would say. It's an absolute masterpiece. So Peter Gabriel, So, brilliant. What else can you say? Number 5 is going to be the debut album from Jimi Hendrix. I like Jimi Hendrix so much, I named my recent pug after him. Hendrix, that's his name. So got a poster right over there. I'm not going to turn the camera, but what can you say about Hendrix that hasn't already been said? The guy was playing guitar back then, and there were guys like Clapton and Beck who were just like, what? What is this guy doing? Just another genius. Again, you have to throw the word genius out there, but Are You Experienced album, Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, and the absolute luscious track, May This Be Love. That solo, I don't know if at this point in my life there's ever been a solo that's that short that kind of just like hits you right in the soul like that solo does. That is, gives me chills thinking about it. Incredible. So yeah, Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix has to be on anybody's top, I would think top 10, top 15, but for me, it's number 5. Let's go on to number 6. All right, so number 6 is going to be the brilliant, brilliant album, Disintegration by The Cure. Man, another band I'm going to see. My wife and I are going to go see them in July down in Philadelphia. My favorite city, well, not my favorite city, maybe one of my favorites because I'm a Philly Eagles fan. I know, lots of chorus of booze, I get it, but hey, been a fan since 1981, pal. What about you? How long have you been rooting for your team? That album, it's so dark and luscious and just kind of like eerie and creepy, but at the same time bright in some spots and powerful. Pictures of You, Plain Song, Fascination Street. The album is it closed out the 80s as one of the greatest, certainly from like English in that kind of new, I hate to say new wave because they're not new wave, but alternative indie, whatever you want to call it. But at that point, they were certainly not an indie band. They were just icons of that whole movement. So I love a lot of albums by The Cure, but Disintegration is just, listen to that album with headphones sometime, it's world changing. It really is. So let's move on to number 7. So number 7, another band that I'm going to be seeing live coming up in August, I believe it is, and that is The National. So The National, they have a funny term that they just gave these guys, the genre of music that they play, and they call it sad dad music, which is sort of hysterical. Now, I'm not a dad unless you count the 2 pugs that I have, but yeah, it can make you sad sometimes. They definitely have some very emotional, lyrics, and just their the tone and the melodies that they write and stuff like that can be sad, but they also have some songs that are a lot more upbeat and things like that. But the latest album just came out Friday and is beautiful. But for me, the album from them is Trouble Will Find Me. Trouble Will Find Me came out in May of 2013 and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Pink Rabbits, I Should Live in Salt, Graceless, Hard to Find. If you're into like sort of mellow, emotional kind of songs, listen to Hard to Find, put on some headphones, just that light piano and the way the vocals kind of just float into the song. Again, this is something that's going to give me chills. It's incredible. The National are one of the greatest American bands. So yeah, Trouble Will Find Me. Check it out. Absolutely brilliant. Let's go on to number 8. All right, so number 8 is, speaking of Philly, as I just did, is a band out of Philly, fronted by a guy named Adam Grandiseel. I can never pronounce his name, but he's formed this band with a guy named Kurt Vile, who's another great musician, but is no longer in the band. And that band would be The War on Drugs. The War on Drugs, I had heard the name of the band, but I had not heard them until Lost in the Dream came out. The album from, what is that, in March of 2014. When I heard that album, it was starting to show up on all these lists of like the best album of the year. It was very early in the year. And I was like, okay, I've got to finally check these guys out. I probably listened to that album wall to wall solidly 10 times, like in a row, like seriously, like one Saturday. Just so pretty and textural and just like gooey with just like, you know, the synthesizers and guitar and this like kind of Americana that fused Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty and certainly Bob Dylan, which Adam, the main guitar player, writer, and singer, he's been knocked a lot because he sounds too much like Dylan, or he's trying to sound like Dylan. And yes, it can be a little bit kind of silly at times, but that's his vibe, man. But that album, like the last song on the album, In Reverse, that alone would give this album for me like a B+. You know, maybe even an A-, like just if it was just that. They said, here's one song, here's our album. It's brilliant. But Under the Pressure, Eyes to the Wind, another single called Red Eyes. I mean, just that whole album is really serious. I mean, best album of 2014, no doubt. So Lost in the Dream by the War on Drugs. Definitely check it out. And then check out the album that came out after that, which I can never remember the name of. It's a very dark looking cover with him sitting in the studio, but I forgot what it's called. But brilliant band, brilliant album. Check it out. So number 9 is going to be a longtime favorite band, one of the kings of the prog-ish metal world, and that would be Porcupine Tree. But they are just brilliant live. Steven Wilson, who's the epicenter and heartbeat of that band, another guy you're going to have to call a genius. Incredible songwriter. His solo work is brilliant, but his stuff with Porcupine Tree is just, incredible. So definitely if you're into heavier, metalish kind of proggy rock, check out Deadwing. Deadwing from Porcupine Tree is just wall to wall with incredible tracks. The title track, Deadwing, is great. Halo, Lazarus, a really beautiful, beautiful mellow song. But for me, it's absolutely Arriving Somewhere But Not Here. That track, it's like, I don't know, 10, 11 minutes long, something crazy like that. It encompasses everything, like psychedelic, you know, kind of trippy rock, and it gets into some crunchy metal. It's just an absolutely brilliant album. It should, I mean, if I was to rank these in actual order, like all the way, this would be probably higher, but it's, you know, it's brilliant. So Deadwing from Porcupine Tree, check it out. All right, so here we are at the end of the list, and by no stretch should you take the fact that I put this album at number 10 as it's the last on the list, or it should be in that ranking. As I said, they're really in no particular order except for Animals. But yeah, this band, Katatonia, they're a Swedish kind of, again, proggy, I hate using that word, but metal band. And I discovered them a long time ago. A good friend of mine, Lance Gifford, a kid who befriended me when I first moved to Suffield in high school. He was a senior, I was a freshman. He saw me wearing like a Metallica shirt or Megadeth shirt, and we became instant buddies, and he exposed me to a ton of really cool metal that I didn't even know existed, like Anthrax and Manowar and all this crazy stuff. But it was later, many years later, in the late 90s, that he mentioned this band Katatonia, who had just gone through a kind of a transition of death metal into like more melodic metal. And let me tell you, this album from 2006, 2006, The Great Cold Distance. Again, this is another one that gives me chills, but these chills kind of resonate and just continue like making me want to shiver. I don't know, I'm supposed to be a writer, but I really lack the superlatives and to be able to fully quantify how great this album is. The Great Cold Distance is so brilliant. It's like albums that I used to love in the metal genre that have a little bit of a progressive kind of thing going, like The Warning from Queensryche, which is one of my favorites of all time. I think Katatonia has taken over that spot. I mean, you know, Porcupine Tree's Deadwing, one of my favorites, the one I just mentioned, number 9. This is better. I mean, this is a lot better, I would even say. So yeah, The Great Cold Distance is just wall-to-wall brilliance. You know, you've got songs like My Twin, Deliberation. Deliberation is so good. July, which is one you see a lot in YouTube videos, people dissecting. It's really, really heavy, but just so well layered and built. It's incredible. And then Soil Song. Whew, I mean, it really is. It may be the most perfect melodic metal album that's ever been made. It may be. I mean, I know people mentioned like in progressive realms, things like Dream Theater or whatever. All these bands are great, But Catatonia's The Great Cold Distance is as good as it gets. I don't know if anything's ever going to beat it. But yeah, so definitely check that out. It's an absolute must own. Hey, I thank you for taking whatever amount of time. I'm guessing it's a solid half an hour that this video is going to be, but thanks for sticking around. Let me know your thoughts. Pop in any bands, suggestions, whatever. And thanks for checking out my video. And please like and subscribe. Tell your friends, send it across the world. Tell me the things you don't like I'm doing. Tell me to shut up, whatever. Thanks for being here. I will see you guys soon.